My buddy Nick asks me, thanks for all you do. I'm really interested in what your thoughts are on Atari. I grew up with the 5200. It's my favorite console today. From someone who has much experience and love for Nintendo, what is your stance on Atari? Do you have any history or memories with Atari? Do you regularly play Atari other than the VCS? Now, I love the Atari. What are you talking about, dude? I grew up with the Atari 2600. I was born the same year the Atari 2600 came out, 1977. So that's something kind of cool. I remember literally when my dad went to the store to buy the Atari. I wasn't with him, but my mom said, like, oh, he's going to get an Atari. And I've heard about it by then, too. I was like, oh, you mean I can play Pac-Man whenever I want? I don't have to put quarters into the Atari to play it at home? And then, of course, we plugged it in, and I saw what Pac-Man looked like, and I was like, this is Pac-Man? But I still played it. It was still fun. It didn't look the same as the arcade, and I kind of got used to that, where it's like the arcade version is one thing, the Atari version is like the inspired by the arcade version, so to speak. But I was able to play Space Invaders and Frogger and all my other arcade favorites at the time with the Atari 2600. I also got into like Adventure and Pitfall, were like my two favorite games for sure, without a doubt. But no, I loved the Atari 2600. Now, I never had a 7800 until like the NES was already available. So I didn't get a 7800 until much later in life. I remember I saw a 7800. I was like, there's a pause. You can actually pause the game. Like, you can stop the game and see where you want to go next and then go from there. I never had a 5200. I was so jealous, though. We still have the store in our town, too. It still exists. But it was our first place in town. It was like a comic book store that did like comics and coins and throwing stars, stuff like that. Vinyl and books and stuff like that. They also did video games. You could sell in your old video games, or buy new video games there, or buy used video games there. And they had Atari, and they had ColecoVision. I had a ColecoVision a long time ago too. But they had 5200 games, and that's what Kix was on. And Kix was one of my favorite games at the arcade, and it was only on the 5200, and I couldn't get it. So I was like, oh man. And the 5200 today is the only game system I have never owned. I've had a 5200. I mean, I've had a 7800. Of course, I have the old school Atari 2600, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, etc., etc., etc. I've had a 3DO, alongside Neo Geo. The Neo Geo, the Atari Jaguar, and the Atari 5200 are three game systems I have never owned. Do I want one now? If I found one cheap, sure. But yeah, it's great memories for sure. One memory about mine too is I grew up in a family of I'm the sixth of 7 children, and we only had one television. Now in the 80s, it was customary to have one TV. It was like fancy to have more than one television in your house, like one in the living room and one somewhere else. We only had the one TV, and so whatever was on TV was whatever my parents were watching. And if they weren't watching something, especially my dad, then we could watch cartoons, we could play Atari or whatever. So I got to the point where I would wake up at 4 a.m. just to play Atari before everyone else woke up in the house. So I'd wake up at 4 a.m., eat cereal, play Atari, and then once other people woke up in the house, then I'll just kind of, step aside and play with my Transformers or something like that. Or my He-Man figures at the time for Atari would have been He-Man. So, but thank you, Nick, for the question. I love Atari, and I still do. Do I play it today? I play it emulated sometimes. I do have an Atari in a box, a couple of them, and I have one of those flashback machines. But outside of that, I'll be honest with you, I do have, I played emulated sometimes too. So big fan of Atari, great throwback, and I've never had the 5200. So maybe that'll be on my next wish list for the next convention I go to. We'll see. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And this is just one of these questions that I answer via Patreon. So consider being a Patreon as well for only $1 a month. Get you exclusive access to some other videos as well as contesting too. Early access to videos, and until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks.